The Miami Hurricanes lost 84-62 to number 10 Virginia in the ACC semifinals. Huge disappointment because it was their worst loss of the season. They'd been playing so well, winning 4 of 5 coming into this one, but they just didn't have it today. That's simply put. Offensively, they couldn't get it going. It was very slow moving there in the first half. They did take a 17-15 lead. Virginia wasn't shooting it well either, but Virginia goes on this 18-4 run there at the end of the first half. Really disappointing finish there the first half. Trey gets his pocket picked and Chance Mallory pulls up for 3, and Virginia takes a 15-point lead into halftime, and it just never could get going for Miami in the second half. They do cut it to 11 there, tip dunk by Shelton there, but then the lead just kept getting bigger and bigger as they went down the stretch. Couldn't get stops. Virginia started making a bunch of threes. They ended up shooting over 50% in the game. And Miami, just a combination, not being able to get enough stops, not able to affect Virginia in what they wanted to do. And then offensively, Miami just couldn't get enough either clean looks or just confident enough in their shots, or they couldn't make three-pointers. Look, they're not going to be, they're not a great three-point shooting team, but 4 of 20 in this one. And they did have a few open looks, but for the most part, Virginia, I thought, played very good defensively, made things really difficult for Miami. Being in the locker room after the game, doing post-game interviews, look, it's not fun interviewing players after losses, especially when they're not used to being interviewed after losses, especially in the locker room. But I thought the guys were good. I thought Malik, obviously they're disappointed. Malik, 8 points, Trey Donaldson, only 8 points. The two of those guys are your leaders. You're expecting them, and they've really been great all year long. The consistency, the production has always been there. They just didn't have it tonight. Malik kind of had some early turnovers. Trey with a couple fouls early on kind of threw his rhythm off. But I thought Malik did a good job in the interviews and just talking about the loss, and really kind of just understood that they just didn't play well enough on either end of the floor. And then, Trey too. Trey's a guy that's, he has said he's the sorest loser, and he was, not super amped to talk afterwards, but he did, and he said, we've got to be better, these kinds of things. And two, one of the things, I said this in the chat there, but where I'm sitting, I got to sit right directly behind the Miami bench, which is great because I can hear some of the interactions with the players and coaches, some of the messages with the coaches to each other and to the players. But just kind of watching Trey and watching a lot of these guys, it's not a lot of outward frustration or Trey not having a good first half there, scoreless, again dealing with foul trouble. On the bench, he's kind of quiet, and then he's showing support. He's standing up and clapping for his teammates and these kinds of things. It wasn't overly frustrated outwardly. And I just think it's more of again, these guys are veterans, and the professional approach is the way they go about it, even when things aren't going well. And again, a lot of things didn't go well in this one. With what the players said afterwards inside the locker room, and I already posted the interviews on the channel, definitely check those out. And with the comments, with the post-game press conference right behind me with Coach Jay Lucas, and also Shelton came up, as well as Dante Allen. And they didn't talk much about playing the day before or anything like that, or being a little bit tired, but so they're not making excuses, but I do think it was a factor. And this is a team that's not very deep. They rely on their main 6 guys, and these guys are playing heavy minutes, over 38 minutes for Trey yesterday. And, I just think he just didn't quite have it, with what we've seen. And I think, it would have been tough, even if they had pulled this one off, to play 3 games in 3 days. I just think with how this team is built, not just that, though, how they play, this physical brand of basketball, we talk about how it works in their favor quite a bit on both ends of the court. I've talked about it all season long. But in games like this, too, against Louisville, a very physical game, Miami is exerting their physicalness on it. Even though they've kind of wore down Louisville, they get worn down. I thought they got worn down a little bit, too, in this one because of that game before. So I think that did play a factor. Look, it's not the reason why they lost. They didn't play well enough. They didn't get into their half-court sets and have enough movement or enough paint touches or get into the paint. I thought Malik Renew wasn't, in great situations to put up good shots, but they, to Virginia's credit, they they know what Miami has. They played them, and they beat them 86-83 back in February a few weeks ago. But, come in with double teams, and they have multiple posts that they can play on Malik and really give him trouble there. And, just other things kind of got a little bit off. We've seen lobs work, for example. We've seen lobs, whether it's, from that overplay that they tend to run there, with Ernest Uday. And the lobs just weren't quite on target. They just were a little bit off, and I think it happens. I think that there's still a lot of reasons to be positive about this team moving forward. Look, it's already been a successful season, 25-8 even with this loss. They are going to be in the NCAA tournament. Coming into it, CBS Sports projected them as a 6 seed, so maybe they drop to a 7, but I think they'll be kind of on that line, that 6-7 seed going into the NCAA tournament. And I think that they'll get some time to rest, a little bit, some days here before they play that game. It'll be on a Thursday or Friday. The selection show is on Sunday at 6 p.m. on CBS, so they'll be dialed in. They're going to have a nice watch party get together there. Looking forward to being there for that. And I think it'll depend on matchups. They're going to play a good team. Anytime you're in the tournament, you always will face good teams coming off good seasons. So, in that matchup, whether it is at 6-11, 7-10, whatever it might be, it's going to be tough. But I'm looking forward to seeing how they do it. And I think they can bounce back. I don't think that this necessarily is a sign of things to come. They know they've got to play better. They had been playing better. Pat Kelsey said, even when Louisville beat Miami there in that regular season finale, he said they're playing their best basketball. And in this stretch, last 10 games or so, I think they have been. Again, this one, they've got to be better. But I think, they can kind of move past it. Look, now these seniors know it's win or go home. And these 3 seniors with Trey, Malik, and Ernest Uday, these 3 guys know what it takes. And Ernest wasn't great in this one either. I touched on the lobs, but just wasn't quite himself. And he did look like, he came out of the game at one point, looked like he was kind of dealing with something. He took that hard foul off the lob there in the second half. So I think he was a little bit banged up, but just Virginia is a tough matchup, and Virginia is a really good team. They improved to 29-4 on the season, a top 10 team in the country. And look, Miami's had trouble with these top 10 type teams. Florida, BYU early. They did knock off North Carolina when they had both of their bigs in there. But yeah, I just think Virginia's a really good team and a deep team. They've got 3 pieces off the bench that are really good. And I think, kind of a matchup situation, it just made things difficult for Miami. And, I think they can kind of bounce back off of this. And just a few quick notes before I wrap this up. I think it was good seeing Timo get back out here, missed the last couple games, but comes back for the ACC tournament, dealing with that back injury. Good to see him get some minutes, and hopefully it's knocked down a 3 there. So hopefully he can kind of get back into a good rhythm. It's good seeing Nome continue to hit some threes. They need at least a little bit of some punch off the bench. So if those guys can hit threes, provide some solid play, I think that'd be good. But really, this was a great day in terms of with Marcus Allen. I got to the arena really early. I like being able to be at an arena early, get set up, and just kind of wait and see. I was here when the team arrived, and then when they go through their warm-ups. And Marcus Allen went through warm-ups as a full participant. It's something I haven't seen. I've seen him out there for warm-ups. And, he's kind of dribbled the ball a little bit and took a few shots, but not participating with the team. And he was doing that today in uniform. I thought it was great, such a great moment for this team. And he actually surprised the team earlier in the day. He wasn't here yesterday, but he flew in. He had his second to last round of chemo treatments earlier this week, and then he made the trip today, surprised the team at shoot-around. They didn't know he was going to be here, and so it was just a really positive moment and a disappointing finish of the day, but it got started great, and it's good seeing Marcus. And I asked True after the game because I know they're close. They played together in Arizona. They're roommates, and they were sitting next to each other in the locker room, so just asked him what that was kind of like. So I think everything is great with Marcus. For him to be a part of the team, around the team, and then participate in warm-ups is great to see, and hopefully he continues to kind of just continue this fight, this battling through what he's going through, though. And then just finally, coming to these kinds of events, it's great meeting other reporters that cover other teams and chatting with them a little bit. So that's been fun these few days. Also, too, though, it's been great. I've kind of ran into some people that like the Hurricanes that aren't living in South Florida, so that's fun. So shout out to Najee, originally from New York. He's here in Charlotte, and also had a good chat with Josh. So shout out to these guys. Really had fun talking with them and stuff. So it's been fun being up here, even though it ends in a disappointing loss with Miami not advancing to the championship game, which I will say, I was going to wait to mention it, but this is only my second time at the ACC tournament. Usually with spring football, I'm not able to be here, or they've had disappointing seasons, but the last time I was at the ACC tournament, that was the year Miami won it. I thought maybe because I was here again that they would be able to win it, but they didn't. But still, it's been a fun experience. But looking forward to getting back to South Florida, and then we'll see where this team goes for the NCAA tournament. March Madness is great. I know it comes with some disappointing results sometimes, like today, but hopefully this team can go on a run and have a fun next weekend wherever they're at. So definitely thanks for watching the video. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. Again, we're on our road to 30,000. Definitely trying to get to that as soon as possible. But have a good rest of the day and take care.